Good morning, everyone. Welcome. Today is Monday, October 21st, 2024. This is our morning work session regarding the 2025 proposed budget. We are scheduled to be in this work session from 10 a.m. to 12 p.m. if that time is needed. Our goal is to have a thoughtful discussion on what is being presented. My name is John Kafalis, Commissioner from District 1, currently the Board Chair, joined by my Commissioner colleagues, Kristen Stevens from District 2, and Jody Shattuck McNally from District 3. And we also have our County Manager, Lorenda Volker, joining us at the table, folks from the Performance Budget and Strategy Office, and of course our Assistant County Manager. With that,
I'll just kick it off quickly and then hand it right to the team that did all the work. Each year we present this budget publicly. We present it to you. You all are very involved in the process. We have work sessions with you. We have retreats with you. We talk about where we are in this process. But this is a chance for this team to formally talk to the public and to you about what is in the budget, what is the calendar, how do things get adopted, what's the process from here, and what are some highlights. So I'll hand it off to the team. And you all can take credit for your good work. We could not do this without this team. They are a small group, but they do a tremendous amount of work and develop really great relationships with our departments and offices.
Thank you. Good morning. Matthew Behunin, Budget Team Lead. And you want to introduce yourself, Alex?
Sure. Alex Jordan, Budget Analyst.
So our role is really one of coordination. We don't want to take credit for building this budget. We've had months of meetings and work being done by all the departments and elected offices, the leadership and the finance staff. And we'll go through all the calendar and all the lines. But what we try to do at this meeting is translate all of those spreadsheets that we love into a story. Like what is the county doing with its financial situation? How are we responding to different external and internal factors? And what do the numbers really mean for 2025? So here's our agenda. We'll go through the calendar, how we got started and where we are now. A few more things to go until we get the 25 budget adopted. We'll talk about the fiscal factors, the environment we're operating in, the key decisions for an incremental budgeting process. We'll go over the budget itself, the numbers, by category, high level. We'll show the general fund balance projection of our future reserves, and then talk about ways the public can provide feedback. So really the budget kicks off in the spring every year with, we used to call it a SWOT analysis. We changed it to SWOC, strengths, weaknesses, opportunities, challenges, where after every service category gets together and evaluates what are the strengths, weaknesses, opportunities, and challenges for each of those categories, we do a summary of that. We present that to you. And then in May, we review the forecast, the latest projection of our revenues and expenses, especially in the general fund, and you all approve initial budget targets. So those base budget targets are what departments use to build their budgets, personnel, operating, capital. And then over the summer, they will prepare requests. And some years we also ask for reductions. And then in August, September, the county manager will meet with every single department director and every single elected office and review all of those proposals. And we also have work sessions with you all to review the same information, and we get direction from you about what you want to see in the budget. October 15th is our statutory deadline. The county manager must submit a proposed budget to you all, and we publish that on the county website, larimer.gov/budget. It's up there for everyone to see. It's like a 400-page PDF of lots of tables, and they're at the very beginning is probably the easiest to consume county manager transmittal letter, where the county manager give some of the same information we're sharing today about what's on the county's mind from a financial standpoint and budget standpoint. And then today, October 21st, we have a work session with commissioners to review everything that's in the proposed budget. November 4th, in a few weeks, we will have a public hearing. And so the public can come and give comments on the budget, and also that's the same meeting where we will review landfill rates. The very next day is important for the budget, Election Day. As you know, in Colorado, every single tax rate increase must go to the voters. And so the budget is impacted by elections most every year. Mid-November, we'll have a final budget retreat and receive final direction to change anything from the proposed budget to the adopted. And December 11th, it's scheduled to have a vote. It's it's something it's not just something you review and say you provide direction to approve. You actually take a vote every year to appropriate the funds, set mill levies, and adopt the 24 revised budget and the 25 adopted budget.
Thank you, Matthew. And before we move on to the next set of slides, I wonder if my colleagues have any questions or comments. I do have one question, but I want to check in with my colleagues. Commissioner, you're good for it. Then my question is as follows, especially with regard to the November 4th public hearing on the budget and certainly the landfill rates, opportunity for folks to provide public comment, et cetera. We're pretty advanced in the process. Can public comments still adjust or influence the budget? Can you please speak to that, sir?
Yeah, when we go out to public meetings, and we've had a few at the library where we call them community conversations with folks, and what we tell people, there are 3 or 4 ways to really influence the budget at any time, because even though the budget is an annual budget, it's a continuous process. We revise the budget constantly, and so if you miss the public meeting on November 4th, or many of the decisions have been finalized already, there are the 3 ways to best influence the budget would be, first, register to vote, and to vote, the voters have to approve tax increase every year. The second would be to join an advisory committee. Many of the budgets you see in here, especially capital plans, are set by advisory boards over departments like natural resources. There's the Open Lands Advisory Board that sets direction on what open space strategies should be used. And then the third is to reach out to your county commissioners and our office by email to show up at the monthly community conversations that you have, and to let you know what's on their mind, what priorities they have, et cetera.
I appreciate that. Just a quick follow-up, if I may, colleagues, and that is understanding all that, 2 things. One is you're reminding me that not this coming Saturday, October 26th, but it's been rescheduled to November 2nd, I believe. There is a budget town hall meeting, I believe in Loveland. I don't recall all the details, but I think it's at the library. So I just want to make sure folks are aware of that, and perhaps we could provide more details there. My second point, Matthew, is what you described makes sense. At the same time, it suggests that this proposed 2025 budget is fairly baked. So therefore, if there were comments that made sense, could we be adding or subtracting ingredients to this particular pie?
Yeah, that's the reason we have a proposed budget. So the proposed budget's done, right? But between now and the end of the year, the proposed budget is just a proposal. We've received direction on what we think you would like to see in the budget, what we think the public would like to have in the budget. But that's the reason we we release it publicly like we're required to by statute. We have a public hearing. We have a few months. We have public meetings. The one November 2nd at 10:15, that is at the Loveland Library, 300 Adams in Loveland. And we also do every other year statistically valid community survey where we can get feedback from the entire community, not just those who will often come to public meetings, to understand the priorities from a more valid standpoint.
Matthew, thank you. That's helpful. Lorinda, would you care to comment at all?
I would. I think the reason we have the public hearing on November 4th and don't adopt the budget till December 11th is in case questions come up, new ideas arise, you have new things that happen, constituents bring new ideas, another local government makes a proposal. We have time to amend that budget because we have a pretty baked budget in terms of the proposed budget. It's not hard to make some changes when you have a pretty good document like these guys have created. The other thing I'll say is a budget is really a plan. We don't know what will happen in the next 12 months. We anticipate what will happen based on what's happened in the past and what we see. And so we do our best to forecast those. But we don't always get it perfect. We didn't predict COVID, for example. And so that's something we had to deal with on the fly. That is not an uncommon event in local government. So our budget is amended from time to time, up or down, to take advantage of opportunities we have to partner with community members or the state, or to do a new project, or to stop doing a project. So it's always kind of in flow, but there's plenty of time between November and December to make real changes.
Thank you. And I think an important takeaway, hopefully the public also takes this away, and that is once we do adopt the budget for next year, calendar year, fiscal year, we start the whole process over again pretty quickly. Therefore, I think it's a good incentive for folks to try to engage as early on in the process as possible, the SWOC analysis and so on. Great. Thank you all very much for indulging me.
Yeah.
Can't wait to hear from Alex, too.
So we will talk now about the fiscal environment we're in, the things that are most impacting the budget, and we're going to start with facilities. So 2024 and 25, we for the first on the list would be behavioral health. A year ago, roughly, the behavioral health facility was opened. We are now seeing about a year of operating costs and revenues. We're still looking at how that will be finalized, and we're going to have to adjust the budget accordingly to match the revenues and expenses of that new service that's being offered by the county. Next on the list would be solid waste. The landfill is expected to be closed this next year. A new north landfill is in the budget to be constructed, and also potentially central transfer station. Ongoing discussions with municipal partners are happening to ensure the financial viability of these facilities as outlined in the master plan, and that work is ongoing. The Fleet campus, this project has been in the works for a long time, 5 or 6 years, with acquiring land, cost increases, but it is set to open in 2 weeks on November 12th. And there's a few service proposals related to this in the budget, but we're hopeful that this will lead to more efficient work for our fleet staff, and it absolutely will be a better environment for them. The old facility was beyond the end of life. Any questions on those first three? We'll talk about ranch and broadband too.
Just a quick comment to clarify. It is my understanding that the current landfill, the latest estimates on when it will reach capacity, I believe is more the first quarter of 2026, not necessarily next year.
Right. Yeah, we want to have the new landfill open before the old one is
That's
finally
probably a good
expired.
idea.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Thanks for the clarification. So the ranch, budget for the ranch events complex includes continuing to implement a master plan, new phase of development funded by the extension and the dedicated sales tax. Activities completed to date include the construction and opening of the 4-H Youth and Community Arena, expansion of the MAC equipment, indoor arena, new RV hookups, and roadway improvements. The goal for the ranch is to eventually streamline operations and efficiencies, nurture the community partnerships, and evaluate those revenue opportunities to ensure that it is financially sustainable. Broadband equity access and deployment. This is the BEAD grant, funded through the state by a federal grant program. A lot of dollars potentially available for us. The grant is open, and about 5 to 6 million will be needed for local match. We have letters of support coming to you all, I think tomorrow, for grant applications. It'll take a few months to get the final reconciliation, see if we get awarded, and the exact amount needed for BEAD. So that will be one of those adjustments to the 2025 budget once we have that final number. So those are some of the big projects that are impacting the budget in many different ways, both capital spending and then operating too.
Thank you. Colleagues, anything?
I think I'll add there that most of these projects are not general fund funded projects. They have their own funding source that is not ad valorem taxes, as we would typically think. So behavioral health has a sales tax, so does the ranch, and solid waste operates on fees.
Good point, of course. I'm afraid I have a question. I think it's relevant, and that is one of our important and upcoming capital improvement projects is the Larimer County Emergency Services Facility. Where does that factor into the 2025 budget?
We have a slide for things that are not in the proposed budget,
Of course.
and that, as we can discuss in a few minutes, is not in the 25 proposed budget.
Thank you.
Yeah. So the next fiscal factor we've been operating under is inflation. The story here is that inflation has come down quite a bit. It's at 2.5% CPI nationally, which is above the Fed's target, but a lot lower than it had been just a few years ago. However, there are other large macroeconomic factors at work here, especially on the operating budget. Natural disasters. We transferred in, if you remember, the 2024 budget, $9.5 million into disaster contingency reserves at your direction. Mid-year, Alexander Mountain Fire occurred, and we transferred, in the same fiscal year we transferred money in, we transferred $1.8 million out. Natural disasters seem to be a growing risk, wildfires, floods especially. And so that's one of the reasons we keep reserves and we have that disaster contingency fund available. But we do expect those costs to eventually continue. The next item, public safety liabilities. We've seen an increase in claims, settlements, and because we're self-insured with reinsurance behind a certain level of deductible, as the claims and liability costs increase, our self-insurance costs, especially for public safety, have gone up. So our risk management team is looking at ways to improve the program, to save us money, and especially exploring ways to reduce risk. Hiring difficulties. The labor market has softened a little bit, but we're still seeing difficulties hiring, especially at the jail deputies. It's a hard position to hire for. There's a 15% vacancy rate right now, last I checked. And then also jobs, it's kind of strange to say, but difficult jobs are difficult to hire for, obviously. If it's at night, if it's on weekends, on holidays, if it's a temporary work, Especially, we've seen difficulty hiring seasonal roles at road and bridge equipment operators. And so they're working with HR on recruiting, and if there's fiscal impacts to the budget, we'll come to you with those. But that's still an area we're seeing difficulty in. And then the last one, legislative uncertainty, gets its own slide, so I'll stop for questions if you have any about those first three. Okay.
I guess I'm on a roll here. I hope these questions are helpful for our discussion.
Yeah.
Regarding the inflation has stabilized point, and certainly understanding that CPI has gone down a bit, that level of costs, and that informs the Federal Reserve and what they decide to do. Have any of these reductions in costs, like CPI, have they translated at all to some of the costs that we're dealing with at the county organizational level? For example, construction costs and that sort of thing. I also noticed that our health insurance rates are going up by 3% and our dental insurance rates are going up by 5%. Can you speak to that, sir?
Yeah, the inflation really impacts our forecast. Do we put in 3% annual increases, 5% annual increases for personnel and operating, or are we okay at our traditional 2%? And because CPI has come down, we're able to put in lower numbers for the projections. And so a decision like around construction costs especially might impact whether or not we try to move forward quickly with the emergency services building to avoid a cost escalation, or to wait to make sure we have enough in reserves to stay comfortable with as a county. Yeah.
Yes, Commissioner.
Yeah, so you were talking about having transferred $9.5 million into reserves for natural disasters, and then having to almost immediately take $1.8 million out. Can you remind me what the reserves are for, or not what their purpose is, but how much is in the reserves at this point for natural disasters?
I'm going to turn to Alex on that one. Fund 102, disaster contingency. The purpose is to respond to disasters. And we renamed it from natural disaster contingency to just disaster contingency because it could be other events that occur that are one-time in nature, unexpected, and add cost to the county to respond.
And those could be anything from actually fighting the disaster, like in a wildfire sense, to, kind of resiliency or building up the community, protecting our watershed, whatever that might look like. Is that correct?
Yeah, fire suppression. There have been flood monitoring, stream gauge, to monitor the level of streams to see if there's a flood coming, mitigation for wildland fires. Do you have the reserve number?
Yeah, so we're planning to start the year with about $18.7 million.
The bulk of those funds do go toward recovery and resiliency. So, the flood happens and then the road has to be put back. And so that's the very expensive proposition, is $20 million to replace roads and make access to communities and those kind of things. So, excuse me, our concern is that we don't just hold what we needed in 2011, but rather we continue to recognize that it will cost more to rebuild a road, that rebuilding it more resilient costs more than just putting it back like it was. And so we're very mindful about how much we recommend putting in that account. It feels like a large amount. In the end, it probably won't be enough. We'll have to recycle our reimbursement from FEMA to be able to really make progress over time. And again, we're still waiting for some reimbursement from 2011. So this is not a speedy process.
Yeah, I think that's important too. I think we understand that as a board and as staff, but I think it's important to remind the public about that because, when we're looking at the budget, there are additional dollars, but if we don't have those dollars in reserve, we can't do that important work of putting our communities back together after natural disasters. And like you said, those costs are just increasing. And I think about, work that was done on the Buckhorn and how you don't want it so it's going to flood again. You really want to put it back so that there's measures in place to protect people in the future and to not wash out roads. So a really important piece for the public to understand is that it's the responsible thing to do for us to have these reserves for this purpose.
Thank you. Commissioner Shattuck McNally?
So this is a big thing I've been pushing and advocating for to have because, living near the Big Thompson and so close, and I've seen and felt this. So it is the day or the minute that the natural disaster starts to occur. We are in recovery and restoration mode. We have to start being able to write checks and be able to respond immediately. And that is whether as we figure out how big or how tremendous it's going to be and where some of those funding streams are also maybe going to come with declarations. We just don't know that. We have to be able to respond. And I believe that even what we have is really probably not adequate if we have another big flood and things. So just so that I think I want to stress that to the public. It sounds like a nice fund to respond, but that if we have another 2013 flood or another Cameron Peak, we probably won't have, it won't be enough for that one. So I just really want to stress that. And we have, with changing climate conditions and the urgency and scale and scope of wildfire mitigation that we need to do to reduce our risk, is we don't have that funding to do the scale and scope right now. And we're working very hard with grant funding and partners, and the whole state is in the same position. And then there's still we talked about the Buckhorn, but we think about Glen Haven and the Retreat, which had 23 little flash floods. Not little. One was, they even say, worse than 2013 in that region. And so it is lots of areas throughout our community and throughout our whole county that is still having to deal with 2020 Cameron Peak post-fire flooding. Just about 2 months ago, when there was a lot of increase in flooding, both Greeley and Fort Collins had to stop taking water from the Poudre because the water was like chocolate milk. And so they had to do other sources. And so I just want, try to expand, trying to emphasize that after these fires, the post-fire impacts are ongoing for years, and we have still a lot of work to do just from 2020, not to mention this Alexander Mountain as it damaged the Big Thompson watershed, and there's just lots of work to do. So just want to emphasize that. Thanks.
Thank you, Commissioner. Please proceed.
So legislative uncertainty. This issue has, we've talked about the special sessions and property tax rates at previous public meetings. But the special sessions of this year, the regular session, and then the special session last year have impacted our property tax revenues to the tune of about $5 million a year. But the thing I want to focus on today that we haven't really talked about with you as a board is the state budget forecast. We just read through the state economic forecast that's used to build the budget, the state budget. And just some highlights. State reserves are low, so they have a statutory reserve requirement of 15%, and they're $370 million below that. Revenues for this fiscal year slightly lower than state forecasts. And the risk of a recession, although is low, if there were to be a recession, the state would be very susceptible to that downturn of revenues. Proposition 130 is a public safety ballot item, $350 million to public safety officers, no funding source for that. And so if that passes, that would be another item that the state would have to come up with to fund. Talking to our legislative affairs coordinator, he said that about over $900 million of a state budget shortfall will have to be made up this next state budget year. And the reason that's important for us is we have many state-funded programs, alternative or community corrections, health department, human services, child protection, workforce center. And so if the state is trying to navigate a budget shortfall, they may turn to local programs or partially funded local programs to make up that gap. So that's something we're watching, which is another fiscal factor that is causing our budget some uncertainty. But happy to take any questions or thoughts on that issue.
I mean, I don't have any questions. I just have a problem that, like, we're going to potentially balance a budget at the state level on the backs of people who are the most vulnerable people in our community. And so I just wanted to state that we will do what we can for our part, but to make sure that that doesn't happen. But at the same time, I mean, all the things that you mentioned, workforce, ComCore, Department of Health, Human Services, those are all really helping people who are at risk in our community. And so, I think it, will be incumbent on us to kind of watch where those reductions might happen and really make sure that they are minimal and that there's a plan to address those problems in the future. And yikes, I mean, it's a scary proposition. But thank you for bringing that forward, because I think it's good to go in with our eyes open.
Talking with some state legislators this weekend, the 900 million, it could be almost 1.3 with some of the numbers they've also been talking about. So that, just to make you aware, there is some other talk of it being higher. So
1.3 billion?
yeah, from 900 mil to
Okay.
possibly 1.3 billion. So
Okay.
just wanted to kind of put that on your radar. And certainly all departments are just like them. They're all, looking and planning for that. So I just wanted to kind of I kind of opened my eyes to know that number might be higher. So just wanted to kind of flag that.
Okay, so all those factors lead into decisions about service proposals. And so like I mentioned, we operate under a incremental budgeting philosophy where we take the prior year budget, we look at the fiscal factors, and we bring that forward to create a base budget for the next fiscal year. And then from there, we entertain service proposals. We say we always communicate to departments, tell us what you need, ask what you need to supplement your programs to keep programs running efficiently. And then if there is a shortfall, we will also ask departments to submit reduction proposals or ways to be more efficient, streamline. And so for this year, we received nearly $12 million of proposals for additional general fund support. And of those requests, 4.5 is recommended to be included in the 2025 proposed budget. There's a big difference between ongoing cost and a one-time costs. It's self-explanatory in the name, but I'll just explain it anyway. So ongoing means that, for example, this 3.1 million will be added to the budget every year, built into future base budgets. And then one time, it'd be something like a capital project or a one-time purchase of consulting services to come in and streamline something, then that consultant goes away, then it's not built into future budgets. And so those requests were evaluated largely against what's state mandated under law, what contracts and obligations do we have that we must fulfill, efficiency gains, are we going to save money by spending some money, and then also strategic priorities. So what is the highest need for or demand from a resident's perspective? And so we'll go through each of those requests. I'm not going to read the spreadsheet, but I'll call out some of the biggest ones. So the The first is sheriff's sworn officer compensation. So this 1.8 million includes an additional 1% above what Human Resources had initially given us as a base budget increase. So 2% for all employees, and then they said do an additional 1% to keep this sworn step plan competitive, and also add an additional step to the deputy specific step series to remain competitive with peer agencies. These next two, child abuse prevention services, this is from Human Services. They requested 5 FTEs. This is funding for 3 of those. And then competency court support services, this is for individuals with severe and persistent mental illness that are justice involved, to support them through the competency docket with the 8th Judicial Court. And then a few of the others, digital accessibility, this is from IT. There is a new state statute that requires local governments to make websites accessible to those with visual impairments, including colorblindness. And so that consultant, the digital accessibility, will help us become compliant with that statute and be more accessible.
One of the things
Yeah.
I'll add about the service proposal process is not every service proposal obviously gets funded, but that doesn't mean that departments don't make difficult choices within their operation to try something new and stop doing something else. And so I don't want to imply that everyone is always asking for incrementally more. Sometimes they get very creative and will do more with what they currently have, knowing that their competing interests across the organization. So the sheriff's office is a good example, maintaining the deputies that we have, maintaining this so that we don't have turnover is really important. It's important to our community. It's very expensive. It's a lot of people. But no other service proposals were approved for the sheriff, who will go back and look at his budget and decide, are there trade-offs he can make? Are there things he can do differently? Are there positions he might fill with civilians instead of sworn? He'll go back and talk to his command staff, his team in general, and make those kind of decisions. So we don't decide what necessarily gets done. What we recommend to you all is, what do you add extra funding to? It's just too big for them to meet that need any other way. And so that's what you're seeing here. That's why the list is pretty short and pretty prescribed.
There are brief summaries of each of these in the budget document if anyone's interested in a specific item, or feel free to reach out to us.
I wonder, since it's been a topic for discussion, and with the understanding that there are brief summaries for these different items, thank you. Regarding the one facilities worker at the ranch for extension 4-H event support, can you say a little bit more about that $107,000? What is that for?
This is one-time funding, so the ranch requested it for a limited term position for 1 year. The extension and 4-H programs, they are operating at these new expanded facilities, and the ranch is still trying to figure out how to best fill those facilities with revenue-generating non-4-H, non-extension events in the off hours, off days of those facilities. And so they said, we need 1 year to be able to understand the scheduling and the process of how to be most efficient with these expanded community type events, 4-H and extension. And so this will offset those costs for 1 year as they try to become self-sustaining.
Well, and in the end, it seems like this is helping to support 4-H programs, but I wonder if we could ask Lori, you had signaled that you'd like to offer some comment on this point. Welcome, if you would be kind enough to introduce yourself.
Thank you, Commissioner. Lori Cadridge, Assistant County Manager. And Matthew's correct in most ways. I think the important piece to add is that for many years, the 4-H programs have taking care of their own facilities. And so there were never anticipated staff increase cost when the new facility came on board. So what we have now is we have the 4-H youth community arena at one end of the campus and the McKee facility at the other end of the campus. And there's not capacity within the 4-H community to take care of the new arena. And there's not capacity within our staff to take care of the new arena and the existing arenas. So this is going to give us a 1-year window to figure out how we're going to take care of that issue moving forward. And hopefully, as Matthew has stated, we can generate some more revenue to pay for that. But either way, it'll have to be absorbed into the ranch budget going forward.
Great. Thank you for that further clarification, Lori. Most helpful. Thanks, Matthew.
So the next list of service proposals are additional costs related to administrative shifts or, for example, risk. We mentioned the public liability cost increase issue. They requested $3 million backfill from the general fund to the risk fund. We felt that $1 million was appropriate for this year to backfill the self-insured liability program, the risk fund. And then there's a few changes in allocations and a few approved exemptions for indirect costs. So that refers to whenever we receive a grant or a program receives outside revenues, there's a cost associated with those fees or grants to pay for human resources, facilities, finance, all the overhead that indirectly costs the county to run those programs. And that's something I'll have on that one. Any questions on those administrative costs? Okay. So here's that slide about what's not in the budget. The very first bullet point, the new emergency services building. We've purchased land, we've done some pre-construction work, and there is additional pre-construction work in the budget. We are seeking grants from DOLA and from federal sources, but there still remains about a $7 million gap in funding for that facility. We hope by budgeting conservatively, maybe finding additional grant dollars or sales taxes come in higher than budgeted at the jail, which could be used to offset costs in the general fund, which could go to this program. Eventually, we hope that this will be funded, but it is at this time not in the budget. Major Justice Center facility needs, that's across the street here. There's a need for new court space that's been communicated to us. In the last facilities master plan, that price tag came in at $200 million. That's, it's not in the budget. Unfunded county road capacity, about $15 million annually. There is a ballot item of a 0.15% sales tax that will go to the voters that, if approved, would be used to fund road capacity projects. Unfunded service proposals, this will be the list that I'll show you after these next few slides. The rest of that $12 million that is not in the budget of needs. And then broadband BEAD grant match. IT originally came with $20 million of match for funding broadband projects, and the budget only has about $5 million of those recommended, which number will be finalized as soon as we hear back from the awards that we receive of what we've applied for. Okay. So the list of unfunded service proposals, I won't read through all of these. I think on the email I sent out and what was in the packet, there was an additional leftover from last year, sergeant position. That wasn't a request for this year, so just a note on that. But this table here, these are all from the sheriff's office alone. So these are needs for public safety that have been requested and submitted to us, not in the budget. And the sheriff's office budget, as a reminder, is about $70 million. And so, as our county manager mentioned, it'll be up up to the sheriff and his staff to be able to fund some of these, if any of these. There's also the carryover process that occurs at the start of every year. If there are leftover dollars from the prior year, they can request those be rolled forward, and we may see some of these at that time. Public safety requests of, I think this is close to 1.5 million. And then some additional requests for other departments, administrative positions, administrative costs, outreach positions at the health department, process improvement position from our own department was not funded, and then some costs in natural resources. And then do want to mention 3 service proposals that were not included as part of the general fund, but could be and will be funded using facilities capital fund reserves. So this would be savings from other projects like the jail improvement project, the alternative sentencing expansion, and then interest generated within those reserves in the facilities fund. So that would be a renovation for the 1601 Brody facility at Estes Park. That's shared with the school district at Estes. And then a renovation for court clerk space at the Justice Center, $700,000. And then a transfer from the disaster fund to natural resources to fund visitors center facility erosion mitigation project that needs to happen with that facility. Okay, so here's the budget. After all that, here's the actual budget. The bottom line revenue is declining by 6% from almost 650 million down to 607. I can talk about each of these categories briefly. It's a non-reappraisal year, so you see the property taxes and assessments are only slightly up. This is the result of new construction, the end of a temporary mill levy credit, and the shift in oil and gas. Sales use and other taxes. Sales taxes projected to be just roughly flat. Motor vehicle use tax is projected to be down. Building use tax is projected to be up 1%. Really no change. Intergovernmental, so the story behind this one, where I was trying to tell the story behind the numbers, is the end of those American Rescue Plan, Rescue COVID recovery dollars. So those programs are largely coming to an end. There's still a few outstanding payments and obligations projects that are in the 25 budget, but the revenues have largely been collected, and so those are not in the 2025 budget. Licenses and permits, the decrease there, it's not as large of a category, but they're down due to parks, camping, and park permits in natural resources are being budgeted probably at a more realistic level. I think our 24 budget, they're seeing those come in a little bit short in there, so they're adjusting accordingly. External charges for services, this is solid waste. Our community corrections program is budgeted in that category as a per diem. Those are expected to increase by 6% overall. There's a lot in there too. Interest rates are going down slightly. They've actually been pretty persistent with some delays in the capital spending and the disaster spending. We were able to invest more of our reserves in higher interest-bearing investments. This is all done by the treasurer and public trustee. And so because we're still seeing some of those revenues come in at those higher rates, the decrease in interest rates hasn't impacted those as quickly as we had expected for 24 especially. And 25, we're still expecting them to go down, but it's actually a pleasant surprise with how high those have stayed. And then internal and other revenue, that category is going down because our capital spending is going down. Internal transfers, this is like when the general fund transfers something into the facilities fund, or a disaster project goes into a program that has been directed by the commissioners to fund. So it's not it's not real money. It's just a transfer that needs to be budgeted as revenues from one side to the other. So you'll see an external or internal expense category as well. But because those capital projects and disaster spending coming to an end, that line is going down. So that's a high level. We have over 12,000 budgeted lines and categories and revenues and expenses. And so this is a summary, obviously. There's a lot in there. And then on the expense side, personnel, largely flat. There is a 2% increase to the pay grade, so the minimum and maximum, and then everyone moves up within those grades. And then for merit, we call that market of 2%, merit of 3%, which we only budget half of that because it occurs on a employee's anniversary date. So if you're at December, you only need 1 month of that. If you're in January, your anniversary date, you would need 12. So we average that out to, half of what is provided to employees in the budget. I will say the FTE count is largely flat. So we do have over 11 increases in an 11 FTE increase in regular FTEs in the budget, but 5.75 of those are converted existing employees from limited term to regular. And so when you think about our entire county staffing of over 2,000 authorized FTEs, is essentially flat. We're not really growing the workforce by all that much. And I can call out some of these. Admin specialist and community development being converted from limited term to regular. Competency team, FTEs, so there was a service proposal related to that. Those are existing positions being converted from limited term to regular. A new fleet position, 2 new natural resources positions, a resource specialist, a maintenance tech, a new building maintenance worker at the ranch. And so most, if not all of those, are not funded out of the general fund. They're funded with fees or other revenue sources. But that's just a thought on personnel and FTEs. I should have had a separate sheet showing those, but that's personnel, huge part of the budget. Operating, that category is going down by 3%. I have some notes on this. Road contracts construction, fewer operating expenses related to capital projects, so those lines are decreasing. And then we are seeing an increase in insurance premiums that are offsetting that decrease by a little bit. But overall, 3% decrease. Capital outlay, big story here. The Fleet Campus project is finishing up, and so that's the bulk of that decline. But also the ranch master plan is ramping up, so we will see an increase in capital spending in that department. Certificate of participation, this is the jail improvement project. Those annual payments are the same as they have been every year and will continue through 2033, I believe. Yeah, that's the last year of those certificates of participation expenses. And then the other financing uses, that's the internal charges, transfers between funds that are budgeted as expenses, but they're offset by internal revenues. They're not, I don't want to say they're not real money, but they aren't real money. So total expense budget is going down 6%, largely through capital and some operating. Okay, any questions on the budget itself, the high level categories?
Thank you, Matthew. Colleagues, questions, Commission?
Thank you, Matthew. I know you just explained this, but could you expand or maybe explain it in a different way, reword it for the other financing uses, the 39%? Just kind of, I was listening, but it just wasn't, I just need to maybe hear that again in a different way.
All right, so we do fund accounting at the county. You thought I said fun. It is fun, but it's fund accounting. So every revenue source will go to a fund, a dedicated fund. It's like a bank account. And so the largest of those is the general fund. And that's where the property taxes go. That's our largest revenue source. And so our facilities program is half funded by fees. Departments will pay a fee for how much square footage they use to facilities. Then facilities will spend money to hire staff to maintain those facilities. Well, not every department pays into the facilities fund. And so for those departments that, like our office, we're general fund, the rest of those facility costs are funded with a transfer from the general fund to the facilities fund. And so that transfer shows up as an expense. So instead of doing a property tax revenue and splitting it up into all the programs like facilities, we book the property tax revenue in the general fund, and then we spend it over to facilities by transferring it over to facilities. And then it's budgeted again as another expense on maintenance staff or plumbing, electrical, right? And so even though there's two expenses, the money's only really being spent once.
And
So other financing uses is that category of internal transfers.
And it's an effort to be transparent, but it's very confusing because we do count the dollars multiple times because they're coming in from different places, but we want to track how they're being used and how facilities in this example is making the best use of those funds so they can track trends.
So because of that, that's why this is down, because,
And the reason it's down is the transfers that had been happening in '24 for disaster revenues and capital projects are no longer occurring in '25.
thank you. I appreciate that. I just was trying to wrap
Yeah.
my head around that. And then I had one other, back to, well, a couple more. Did I hear you correctly? Maybe you can clarify on the key decisions for the service proposals for the facility renovation and on the two, that money from the capital reserves was, did I hear you say through using interest? Or
Yeah, so every fund, the reserves are invested countywide, all the reserves are invested. And so if there's a reserve in a specific fund, that can generate interest. And so if, for example, the capital facilities fund here in this case, the money hasn't been spent yet on like the jail improvement project or the fleet campus, if there's some delay, those funds are invested and generate interest. And so the reserves in the facilities capital fund are going to be used to pay for those two renovation projects.
And sometimes projects come in, shockingly, a little less than we expected, right? So we will plan for a $2 million replacement of a chiller. Facilities will go out and get bids, so it'll be $1.75 million. That remaining amount sits in that account, and so that's available for other uses as well and to be invested.
Okay, thanks. And I know we have, I'm going back to, because this has kind of been bounced around in my heart and my head the last 45 minutes or so. When we talked about some of these unfunded service proposals, all of these are important. It's not like they're not asking for extraordinary things. These are all needs that are very important and all priorities for us. We just have to, the budget just doesn't support it this time. So I just wanted to kind of make note that when we talk about the park ranger general fund support, I know I was just thinking about, we have such full parks, and this to me is also public safety. And I know it comes out of the sales tax, but there is, they had worked, a lot in overtime during the two natural disasters because we had to shut down the reservoirs, and they had to keep people out and help support that. And just knowing there's been, just seeing how hard they've worked to really wrangle the high usage at even Horsetooth and stuff. I just think that this is not just being a park ranger, this is also part of public safety and protecting our resources and assets, but also just making sure everyone has an enjoyable experience. But, I just wanted to kind of ping that just because I look at all these and they're all really important. And I know these folks wouldn't ask for the service proposals if they didn't need them. So I look through all this and I know these are all needs. So I just wanted to kind of make that little comment, just to ping, know that I'm
Yeah.
just, that's still kind of bounce around my head. So thank you.
So that's a great example, and I think there's a story behind each one of these. Excuse me. In that particular one, we're monitoring to make sure that the time being spent by these rangers is at the facilities that sales tax covers. And so we now have a partnership with the sheriff's office and with dispatch to figure out how many calls are they going to that are assisting the sheriff, how much are they getting from the sheriff's office in terms of training and that sort of thing that they're not paying for. What does that business relationship look like, to make sure that we are being fair about it? And so just because we said no, not this year, doesn't mean it would never happen. There could be a tipping point, and we'll just have to keep watching, knowing that we have professionals who will ask the right questions.
Thank you for saying that. That means a lot to me. And also, just if they're helping with a natural disaster, should some of that some of that revenue, or not, it's not revenue, some of that funding to, because we have that, Lori does such a great job making sure all the employees have that classification so that funding can pay for some of these when we have reimbursements. But also, I was thinking, they had, during a peak time, they had to shut down for, 2 weeks, and that was a lot of loss of revenue for them. And so I don't know if that's something to be recovered through some of those reimbursements from the state or federal government. So just something that I have been thinking a lot over the last 2 months, and wondering how that all looks like. And I haven't had a chance to sit down as we've had these discussions and look into it deeper. But I just wanted to kind of let you all know that's been kind of in the back of my head as I look at what all the things that we funded. But I also wanted staff to hear from me and that I realize these are all important things and needs, and this is, we don't take this lightly. This is hard decisions, and we have been talking about this for months now, and spending a lot of time. And I appreciate all that you all do as a team, as you sit here in front of all those departments in these meetings that we aren't in, but we get the synopsis of it. You guys spend a lot of time talking and asking these questions, and really taking a deep dive in this. And I know you all, this is not a list that has been vetted and thoroughly thought through, and I just want to thank you for that. So I'm not being critical, I'm just saying some of these kind of weigh heavier on me than others, but they all weigh heavy on me. But I just wanted to also say I appreciate the work that goes into this, because this is not easy. So thank you.
And that actually is a great lead into what drives decision-making, and where the line is on what can be funded and what cannot. So we always show the general fund balance projection. So this is a forecast of the reserves in the general fund, and then also the, I named it the Climate Change Impact Fund, but it's the Disaster Contingency Fund. We renamed that a few years ago, but the slide's not update. But so partly cloudy is the forecast on the economy. We've said that a few years in a row now. The risk of a recession has been lowered from what it was last year. Lower inflation, also lower interest rates impacting different revenues. The legislation from the special session has been included in the forecast now. And the thought of continued legislative uncertainty is impacting the forecast. But here it is. So the story behind this chart, and so the light green line would be the ending balance for the general fund. The dark green line would be the disaster contingency fund. And then those two, the blue line and the yellow line there, that would be the 20% of annual operating expenses and the 10% of annual operating. So just like the state has a target of 15%, we have a target of in between 10 and 20. And right now we have healthy reserves. We're above our target. But if you project our revenues and expenses out into the future, we are facing a deficit at least until 2030, when some of the larger tax increment financing districts expire and those revenues that are currently being diverted away return to the county. And so that's kind of the story of the reserve forecast, and why so many of the needs just cannot be funded right at this time, at least.
And so this is not a crystal ball. This is just using the same kind of assumptions we typically do to look at the future, knowing that we have time in 2025 to be very thoughtful about how do we get these numbers between these two lines within the target. We want to make sure we do it not across the board. We want to make sure we do it wisely, using our expertise of our professionals, getting community input, trying to figure out how to make little tweaks along the way so that we don't find ourselves kind of dipping down below this yellow line like you see projected here. We talk about levers. It's just decision points that we make. It could be that we don't fill vacant positions in some areas, or it could be that we change a fee structure, or there are lots of different ways we can get here. It really depends on what departments come up with, what you all are hearing, what you all are proposing, and how we collectively talk about, going forward as a community. The good news is, this is not the end of the world. This is not terrible news. It's not great. We have a little bit of work to do, but we know we can do it, and we have the right people in place to get there. So we're very confident, starting in January, that we'll begin that process.
So, a couple of questions. First, just to reemphasize for the public, a lot of this is projections with all these things you talked about, stable county, lower inflation.
Right.
But also we have the revenue cap. So this is all.
Right. And
so that is I don't even call them special sessions anymore since they've been lots of them. And the last one they try to call it extraordinary, but the last two have not been helpful. And I know we had a conversation about that with some of our other electeds this weekend. So that's all in here. So just to know, some of this is of that special session and what the consequences of that.
Right. So when we show a forecast, it's important to talk about downside risks and upside risks. So some of the downside risks, there's no natural disaster built into this forecast. There's no recession built in. On the upside, maybe our carryover or our turn back will be higher than the 3% that we have expected. Maybe our revenues will come in a little bit better than we're forecasting. That's what we would hope. But there are, it is just a forecast. It's not a crystal ball. There are downsides and upsides.
Well, you answered my next question was that shows the disaster contingency. I now see climate change, but it is the natural, for me, it's
disaster.
just for natural disasters and that could be a rolling power outage. It could be lots of things, right? So, but it looks like it stays the same, but we've already chipped away at that. And so
Exactly.
This is not, this is, for me, it's not if, it's a when this happens. That little darker green will shrink unless we have other ways to replenish that. So that's my next question.
There's no additional funds being transferred into the disaster contingency fund in this forecast. If there were a disaster in a future year, we would need to either hope for additional revenues above our forecast or somehow reduce our expenses. And so that when we talk about levers we can pull to adjust this forecast, those are the decisions that you make at every year, that list of what's in the budget, what's not in the budget, when to move forward on a capital project. That all can impact what happens, and it would be a decision that would need to be made at that time.
Thank you. My last question for now. 2029, we have some major ERAs expiring and TIF agreements and all that stuff. Which, I'd love to have us double, triple check the language, make sure that's really going to happen. From what some people said to me the last 2 weeks. But I'm curious, is that included in this picture?
Yeah, that is the two districts we're talking about. It's Centera in Loveland and then Timnath. And they total about, I think the last we checked was 8 to 10 million a year. And it's not new revenue for taxpayers. It's just diverted revenue that's currently going from instead of to the county from the taxpayer to the district, which is under the purview of the cities. And so, yeah, that's built into the forecast.
Because one of those has been 100% diversion for, by that time, 25 years, just to make sure.
Yeah.
It won't be new taxes for us. Just, I'm glad you clarified that. It's just, it will be coming back as it was supposed to be originally intended to the counties instead of being diverted 100% to the other entities. So, okay. So, but that's in here.
Yeah.
So if we didn't have that coming in, that would, those numbers
Yeah.
would look,
That's where you see the tick up in
Okay.
2031, and the budget is again balanced, and revenues cover ongoing expenses.
okay. That's helpful. Thank you.
Okay.
Don't see any questions or comments at the moment. I believe we have at least one more slide.
Yeah, last one is public feedback. So we've talked a little bit about this. You can view and explore the budget on our website, larimer.org or .gov/budget. We have a budget explorer tool, so you can see where your taxes are going. You can look up your own property if you're a property owner and see your property tax and where it goes. You can look at, I call it the brownie graph, where you can see what portion of the budget goes to what departments and service areas. You'll see on there that about half of the general fund goes to public safety. And you can also find our email addresses and yours, commissioners, for any resident that wants to submit specific feedback about anything they see on the budget, or they can ask us questions. We have community conversations scheduled. We mentioned one November 2nd at 10:15 a.m. at the Loveland Library is the next one. We do community surveys every other year, and we have, of course, public hearings. Public hearing on the proposed budget for November 4th at 6 p.m., and this will be downstairs in the hearing room of this building at 200 West Oak. And then the budget adoption hearing will be in this room on December 11th at 2:30 p.m. And we appreciate everyone that's participated in the budget process, staff, those that have attended public meetings, and you all for your thoughtful direction on what to add in there, and happy to answer any other questions. And thank you for sitting through the presentation on a lot of information.
Thank you very much, Matthew. And before we go to the colleagues, I wonder, Alex, you've been a very good listener, and thank you for the one data point that you provided us earlier in the presentation about the balance of the disaster contingency fund. Is there anything you'd like to share, any wisdom about all of these spreadsheets and numbers?
I would just,
Have to.
that's okay. I can chime in briefly. Just to echo what was said previously, I know this is a difficult process. A lot of difficult decisions have been made throughout the year. A lot of thoughtful discussion with all of the departments and with you all, and we appreciate all of the time that staff and departments put into putting this together, and all of the conversations that we've had with you all throughout the process, and we're looking forward to doing this again next year.
Great. Thank you for those complimentary comments. Colleagues, any questions, feedback? Commissioner Stevens.
Yeah, I don't think I have any questions. I mean, we've seen this material before, and I think it's, especially through the retreat process. But I do want to say thank you for walking us through this. I think that as the community can now gauge, this is not an easy process to go through. And we're really trying to we're not only required to have a balanced budget, but we're trying to create balance in our community of what's funded and what we just can't afford to fund. And, when I think about the service proposals, first of all, there's some for community safety, and then otherwise largely really go to help people who are vulnerable and at risk in our community. So whether that's, competency court support services or child abuse prevention, we're really trying to look at, taking care of people in our community and meeting the needs that we have in our community. And then another thing I want to say is some of those costs are like ongoing. So, they maybe had been funded by a grant, and now we need to pick up those costs, like the Juntos program, which helps Hispanic youth graduate at higher rates and have a plan for their future in college and careers. And so, not, sometimes we hear in the community, and I wouldn't say often, but sometimes we hear that we're either not balancing a budget or growing government in some kind of way. And I think that between the service proposals, which were very carefully vetted, and the fact that we're not really increasing any, we call them FTEs, but full-time, staff, we really aren't growing we're not really growing our budget, we're not really growing our programs, we're not really growing our staff. And so I think that we've been really fiscally very responsible, putting aside dollars, not growing the government, putting aside dollars for emergency funds. And so I just wanted I think that there's some misconceptions out in the community about what's happening. And so I would encourage people to engage if they feel like there's something that they don't understand or a place where they feel like we're growing. But as been presented today, we have made some very thoughtful decisions with the help of staff to really bring forth a budget that reflects our values, but also really keeps in mind that we care about the money that you're entrusting to us, and that we are trying to use it wisely and use the conversations and the polling and the surveys that we've done to inform how we spend those dollars. So I just thank you for, helping us through this. It's not an easy process. And certainly, we will look for, tweaks is a nice way of saying, there may be future cuts to programs that we all care about. And so as that happens, we'll need even more information from the community on where we make those decisions and where we make those tweaks to be able to make sure that we're still offering services that the community needs. So thank you very much. I appreciate all the work that you've done. And like I said, for community members, please be in touch if you have any questions about the budget. Thank you.
I'll restate my gratitude and thanks to you all, the team, and Lorenda and Lori. I know you all sat through all those meetings and worked hard on helping us through this whole process that's been months in the making to really come up with this budget. And I will, agree with Commissioner Stevens. We have to do a balanced budget. We've always done a balanced budget. If you look over the last 3 years, we really have not increased things, programs, and I think this is like the second year in a row we really have kept FTEs flat and relatively flat. And so it just, it's amazing to me how this whole process comes together, and we arrive at a balanced budget, but that comes from the partnership, collaboration, and hard work from all of our department managers and staff and budget team and analysis and all the other folks in the departments that help with budgets and getting things out and go for grants and watch, thoughtfully the spending and planning. It is literally everyone, all the employees at the county who work really hard to kind of help us with this budget, because budgets are also visions and kind of where our priorities are. And we have this new strategic plan, and I see that in this budget as well. And I just want to commend you all for a very arduous process that you make seem so simple in this quick presentation today. And well done, by the way. But this presentation, and Josh, you too, is just months and months of work. And so I just want to make sure the public understands that. It's not just a easy hour and a half or so talk. We've been meeting in budget retreats, and you guys, I think of all the hours you've been in this room talking with departments and stuff. It's tremendous. And I also know that we've been trying to get feedback from the public, and I've heard from the public the last week or so about the budget. We've heard it out in lots of community events, and I'm really grateful for our budget explorer tool. I show that to people almost, if not monthly, every 2 weeks or so. I'm just trying to get people to go on and learn. And you guys really have done a great job. But that's kind of new since we came on to have that that tool for us to explain things to folks. And it's really in a nice way to show them where their tax money is. And I think we have a very transparent and accountable process for all those in the community to show that we're really being good stewards of taxpayer dollars and being very conservative, because we do have, we in a tumultuous time that we're kind of have come through, that there's a lot of uncertainty, and inflation and construction costs and changes at the federal and state government with funding, which has underfunded some things that are really important for taking, as Commissioner Stevens said, some of our most vulnerable in our community. And so it's hard to meet all the needs that we have. And we're kind of that social safety net and unseen part of government that we really work hard to take care of our communities and in partnership and collaboration with our municipalities. So I just really want to commend you all, again, to just making something that's such a long, complex process seems so, you do it in a way that I think anyone can understand and listen and learn. And so I just want to commend you for that. Thank you for all the work, and just look forward to our community conversation coming up and the budget hearings. And I really encourage the public to come and learn and participate and be involved, because this is us working on your behalf and using your hard-earned tax money to do the most good for our communities and what we have statutorily to do as well. So I just hope more people will engage. Thanks.
Thank you, Commissioners. I have a couple of thoughts to share, very brief, and a question, actually. And one is, I certainly echo, place exclamation points on the comments made by my fellow commissioners, so I appreciate you covering important ground. I would add to the appreciation a couple of things. One is your willingness to get out in the community and, help people to understand what can be complicated stuff. So thank you for that. And in particular, I presume you're aware that you're the main presenter at the upcoming North Fort Collins Business Association meeting, where you'll explain further the impacts of the legislative sessions on the county budget, but perhaps most importantly, on people's property taxes, residential and non-residential. So I do appreciate both of you and the entire team for being out in the community. Secondly, it's been stated, but I suppose I'll say it again, it is a real team effort. Our budget folks are mighty and smart and strong team of people that crunch numbers and come up with forecasts and take in a lot of information from the state revenue forecast, quarterly revenue forecast, etc. So thank you for all that. The event on Saturday, November 2nd is 10:15 to 11:45 a.m. at the Loveland Library, as has been stated. I believe it's only an in-person event.
I believe that's right, based on the technology in the room.
And I will come to my question in a moment. I just also want to repeat the website that is on one of your pages, the previous one, and that is larimer.org/budget. And indeed, that provides the narrative, the entire budget, some overviews that are, this presentation is probably on there, will be on there, of course. And that darn Budget Explorer is really a good tool. It does help explain things well. And again, it is a very complicated thing. So I want to make sure folks are aware of that. There it is, front and center. Oh, and then my question. So in the revenue slide, you indicate that from 2024 to 2025, thank you, property taxes and assessments will increase by approximately 2%. On the revenue side, about just under $5 million. Given that this 2024 is a non-appraisal year, what do you attribute that bit of an increase, since property values will probably be similar or the same when we get our notice of valuations from the assessor's office, not from the commissioner's office, in May or so? What do you attribute this to?
So in a non-reappraisal year, there are still a few things that could change with property taxes. And so there are additions to the tax roll, which means if you build something, even in a non-reappraisal year, it may be added. If you remodel your basement. Then also oil and gas is reappraised every year based on the market value of, I think, oil or the production. And then the expiration of any temporary mill levy credits from the prior year would be included. But if you haven't done anything to your house, your assessed value should stay the same until next year, which would impact the 26 budget.
Great. Thank you for answering my question, Matthew. And Alex, thank you as well. Josh and everyone. Yes, Lorinda, are you up for a few brief words of wisdom?
I guess I'll just wrap it up and say thank you. Your engagement today, you've been engaged through the entire process. It's great to be able to set time aside to bounce ideas off, to get direction, so that we don't go off on a tangent that you aren't on board with as well. The three of you have been very communicative, very aligned, very supportive of the community and the community's needs, and understanding from staff's perspective. There are things that they would love to have to do their jobs, to do their job more or better, and we just can't do all of those things. So that message is loud and clear amongst the leaders as well, that this is a very collaborative process with you as the decision makers, in addition to the budget team, and that they know they can rely on that budget team to represent what they've heard from you accurately. And I think that makes this organization unique. This is not a mysterious process internally. It's very well understood. It's very prescribed. It's predictable. We know what's going to happen each year. And I think that helps create some stability across the organization. And you all are a very large part of that. So thank you to you. Thank you to the budget team, to Lori, to Josh, to everyone who plays a part in this to get us to this place we are today.
Great. Thank you, Lorinda. Thumbs up. I don't think there's anything else we have to add. Therefore, at 11:27 a.m., we are adjourned, and much food for thought. Thank you. Yay.